Cobb Center is a group home that is owned and operated, or at least was owned and operated by a parent company called Children's Home Society. It was in Seattle, Washington. It had two cottages, Cottage A, Cottage B. We know that it was operating at least as early as the 1970s. And since then, up until its closure in the early 2000s, we know that there were dozens of children who were abused by staff members, who were abused by other residents, and the abuse included sexual abuse as well as physical abuse. We know that there were reports of sexual abuse as early as 1970. There was a particular staff member, his name was Bob Decker. He was a night staff man who took advantage of his position and just exploited some of the children who were there. And some of the children who were there were as young as 5 to 6 years old. And in particular, back in the 1970s, when one of the residents who we represented was abused by this Bob Decker, reported it to one of the supervising counselors there. His name was Tom Gill, back in the 1970s. Nothing happened. He just ignored it. And so we then later found out in the early 2000s that this very same Tom Gill later then pled guilty to sexually abusing a boy at his own personal home in his capacity as a social worker. And so we know that this has been an ongoing issue since the 1970s, and it continued on until, like, as I mentioned, until the early 2000s. The state was well aware that this abuse was happening. We know that in 1996, the state investigated a staff member whose name was Kenneth Bell for abusing 2 children there. He initially denied the allegations, but in the 2000s, he pled guilty to those very same allegations that he did sexually abuse 2 children there. So there's a long history of kids being abused at Cobb Center, the state knowing about the abuse happening, and nothing happening. They're not doing anything, or they didn't do anything to protect the children who were so vulnerable and needed the help that they needed there.